Welcome to another portion of Healing Aspirations on our YouTube site. We're going to address the issue of guilt and the possibility of being able to overcome it. It haunts our lives. Certainly all of us have felt badly about some of the very negative experiences we have had, which we performed in this negative way, and we will constantly have feelings of guilt when we think about it. It reoccurs and reoccurs and reoccurs, and it's as though we just can't get rid of it. In fact, if we look at our own personal lives, we would see the misery that this causes us to think that there is something unforgiving. And yet, we remember that when Jesus speaks of this problem, he states in the time when he was being crucified that, "Forgive them, Father, they don't know what they're doing." Now that's the solution that Jesus states is for guilt. If you don't know what you're doing, how in heaven's name can you turn on yourself and expect yourself to know something that you don't know? How can you expect to have a healing when you have no idea at all about what is the process for the healing? A troublesome issue. And so we need to go at it. And so I started with the question, should we be responsible for overcoming guilt by ourselves? Should we be responsible for knowing the answer, to coming up with the answer, to knowing what the solution is to this? And if we don't, well, there's something wrong with us, and we're coming up with another shortcoming to feel guilty about. And so it's guilt, piled upon guilt, or you think that you have solved it, and it looks good, and then it reoccurs again. Now, guilt about feeling inadequate and a failure, and fearful of going at this topic because it raises such uneasiness inside of ourselves that we don't want to face the uneasiness. Well, I'm going to use the story of Isaiah, and chances are you ran into this story in some of the other segments, but this is another application of it. Isaiah is one of the three main prophets of Israel. Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, the major prophets we found in the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible. Isaiah suddenly realizes he has become before God. Now he's obviously in a raised state, that he is aware of the presence of God, and you therefore know that he's not in the human mind. And yet, his reaction when he sees God and knows that he is before him is his stunning shock that he is before his Maker, before his Creator, and he states, I have guilt because I have unclean lips. He states it. I'm before my God, and I am with unclean lips. Now, you could say, well, this is good news. He knows that there's something wrong, so come on, Isaiah, straighten it out, clean up your lips, where's your toothbrush, whatever it is you're going to do, but go ahead and do it. But God knows something different. An angel appears with a burning coal and touches Isaiah's lips. Now let's look at that action. What is it saying to us that's relevant to ourselves? It states that Isaiah could not by himself solve the problem of his feeling guilt, of his fear of his unclean lips before his Creator. There was no way. All he could do was feel fear at this moment of being before his Creator with unclean lips. You do not see that it is encouraged with Isaiah. Okay, now come on, Isaiah, let's get it together here. You know what to do, don't you? Just say, stop it, or whatever it is that you're going to say. Get your act together, Isaiah. Come on, you can do it. There is none of that whatsoever in the story. God doesn't even say anything to him at this point. God automatically takes an action by which to clear away his guilt, because Isaiah has to be in good shape in order to bring God's messages back to this world of how people need to have healing. And so God acts, sends this angel to touch Isaiah's lips with a burning coal, which you can recognize is a symbolism of purification. And this is the only action that got taken. God stepped in and touched Isaiah's lips, the source to him of his fear and of his uneasiness before God. And next, God says, "Who shall I send?" Notice, he's talking of the fact that the prophets are people who bring God's words into this human world as part of healing. God says, "Who shall I send?" And Isaiah at this point raises his hand and says, "Send me." It is obvious that he no longer is down on himself, is no longer fearful about his qualities, feels confident that he will be able to accomplish what God would want him to be able to accomplish. All done by this single action by God. And that's the hint, folks, that it is only God who can help us to overcome guilt. It's the only way. We can't do it ourselves. This story recognizes that God recognizes we can't do it ourselves, that we have created a human mind that is filled with guilt and fear, and there is no way we can use our human mind and the thinking and the reasoning from this human mind to solve the problem. It's only God that can solve it. Well, if you say to me, well, okay, Bob, how God solve it? All of a sudden he's free of all his guilt. What God do here? What has happened is that Isaiah's statement of having unclean lips is Isaiah's recognition that he can't solve anything. He cannot solve it. This is unclean lips has not occurred just at this moment. It has haunted his mind. And by his stating it, he is giving the indication that he is without a solution, has none. And so God substitutes the solution, which is the reoccurrence of the awareness of the fact that our mind is one with God. There is a mind which is one with God. And it is this mind that suddenly rises into consciousness and enables Isaiah to be ready to perform what God wishes him to perform. Now, are you ready to be able to do that yourself? To be able to take your guilt feelings and state them to God. God, I did this and so at one time, and I feel with shame and guilt over it that I would have ever done such a thing. But I ask your help now to be able to look upon this from you. Now that prayer, or a prayer similar to that, is what helps. Isaiah had thrown the sponge in. Isaiah was stating that I cannot solve this problem. I am before my God, before my Maker, with unclean lips. And God has stepped in order to be able to solve the problem for Isaiah. And the problem is that Isaiah needed to be in another mind. Now we'll talk further about this in the second segment.